the overconsumption conversation comes up, and the reason, part of the reason behind it is because I'm super guilty of that and super guilty of over consuming things. And I just wanted to have a conversation around it, because I think that it's one of those deals where we don't even realize how much we're over consuming. And this is not just food, right? Like instantly when people think about it, it's, oh, I consume a lot of food, and this is a fitness podcast, so like we're talking about fitness and things, but it's fitness for your whole life too. Like it's fitness in everywhere: fitness mentally, fitness physically, fitness nutritionally, fitness spiritually, all the things, right? Like, and so the overconsumption conversation comes into play and makes a big difference when you really take a step back and think about how much you overconsume on things. And the obvious one is diet and nutrition. You can overconsume food and then you feel like crap. But I think what's happening and what you're talking about with the forgetting things is we just overconsume. We have so many things going on that we have so much coming into our brains that we get distracted sometimes. This fun little story. My wife tells me all the time that I forget about her all the time. Cause like I'll have to run out to the grocery store or something, and she'll ask me to pick something up for her that I wasn't on my initial list. And then as I'm walking out the door, she'll say, oh, grab me this too. And then because my mind is on 4 million things all the time, and when I get in the car, I'm naturally in this habit of, this is my time to consume a podcast or listen to a YouTube video or something like that. I start consuming whatever it is that I'm going to listen to in that moment, or whatever comes on, picks up where I left off. And then I completely forget about what my wife asked me to get her.
Yeah.
And then I come home and she goes, did you get me whatever it was? And I'm like, oh no, crap. And then, so, but that is me being completely guilty of over consuming something and being completely distracted. And so that's probably when you switched your brain from, oh, I'm going to tell Mike this, and then we started recording and talking about all this, it's just the brain just goes all over the place.
The lesson learned is when I have it in my mind, I just need to tell you. I was trying to be fancy and cute and tell you on the air. What I tell my wife to do, and it's great because I realize I do forget, is on the way, she'll usually text me a list.
Yeah.
And then I'll even say, do you need anything else? So I kind of cover it that way because I can be forgetful. But also, you and I have talked, how many weeks or even months has it been that you and I have felt, especially like we're not in a rhythm or a workflow?
Mm.
It's kind of hand in hand with, I guess we could have dedicated the episode, but I think it goes hand in hand with what's called toxic productivity. There's people
Sure.
out there that, I worked 18 hours today and 20 hours and only slept 2. And this,
Sure.
you know what I mean? And for some reason that hustle and grind, which I hate those words, tend to impress people.
Sure.
But really, are you half-assing the entire 18 to 20 hours you're supposedly working? That's and with us, we've been trying to find a sweet spot of what's the rhythm you were talking about before, that journal of trying to plan out your week. And I
Sure.
tried to do that, but it's really still,
Sure.
maybe it's because I'm still in the feeling out process between the wrestling channel, the fitness channel, doing this and other things, but it's tough. It gets very confusing. Then it's paralysis by analysis. What am I doing wrong? And it looks like you're doing everything wrong
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you're
No,
looking at YouTube videos and listening to the podcast about how to solve your overconsumption problem.
right. And it's such a thing. Like we're putting out content for people to consume, talking about overconsumption. And so I think just to call it out, like, if this is getting in the way of productivity, it's knowing what to consume, when to consume it, and not letting it get in the way. And I think sometimes, I know for me, I'm guilty of letting my consumption of things get in the way of my productivity. And so, but then also too, like, the consuming can be this feeling of productivity where you're not actually productive, like to your point of working 16 hours a day. Well, you're just feeling and consuming that feeling of I'm working, but were you actually productive in that 16 hours a day? Right. And so I think to just address the elephant in the room, if this consuming this podcast or consuming any type of podcast is getting in the way of your productivity, turn it off. I know podcast people don't say that, but turn this off right now. Don't listen to it if it's getting in the way of what you need to do. If you need to be doing something else right now, shut this off, come back to it later, right? Like it's not something that you need to I think it comes down to prioritizing the consumption that you're doing. If this is giving you a great benefit, awesome. Please listen. Please continue to listen. If you're getting benefit from this, like, comment, and subscribe, right? Like
Mm.
please let us know. But the thing is if your consumption gets in the way of what else you have to do, then don't do it. It's like with diet, it's with content on social media, it's with knowledge, like if that stuff is getting in the way of action, then you really need to think about, should I be consuming this right now in this moment?
Well, the two best places to do that, most of my consumption of video and audio material is during my workout and during drives.
Sure. Yep.
So, and also phone calls if you need to do calls, but really I don't even like to be distracted with calls or anything like that. But that's usually what I've been trying to do. Here's a little story. This new phone, like I talked about, the case was late. So
Mm,
the case didn't come in, and I'm not going to carry the phone around without a case. So for 2 days, almost 3 days, this thing stayed on the charger and I only used it when I needed to maybe text my wife back or do whatever. But even then, I'm here in front of my Mac. When I
yeah.
drove places, I put the thing down and listened to podcasts on the drive, then put it away and didn't bring it into the store. In other words, my consumption of mobile content went down about 90% over 3 days. And
Sure.
I was super productive. So it always comes back, obviously, overconsumption and all the negative feelings, I think, really do stem from this device right here.
Yes.
Social media, consumption, comparison is the thief of joy, whatever you want to use, toxic productivity. Like, oh, I was researching on my phone for 2 hours. No, no, you
Yeah.
weren't. No, you
Yeah.
weren't. We
Sure.
weren't, and neither were you. So there's a whole lot of different stuff that you can, all those things lumped into one with overconsumption. You really have to be careful because you and I know, and especially I know after being sick, my energy is very limited.
Sure.
So I try to be careful on how I spend it. But at the same time, I talk to you, I text to see how many times over a past 2 to 3 weeks. What sickness is it as well, where I'm almost over consuming my own productivity, meaning that the
Mm,
more I do, the less I feel like I'm doing. What is
yeah.
the mind F with that? What is the
Yeah.
dichotomy, the contradiction that
Yeah.
I'm being more productive, but I feel more like a failure at the same time?
Yeah. That's a weird thing. It's a weird feeling when you get into that spot where you're producing
Have you
stuff.
ever been in that spot?
Oh yeah. I mean, I get in that spot all the time where you just feel like you got so much that you've done, but then you're like, I need to do more because I didn't do enough, and it's just this feeling that just never feels like it's enough. And I think that's what leads, that same line of thinking applies in all areas, you just feel like it's not enough. And so like I'm really guilty of the knowledge piece of this, the overconsumption of knowledge, like I think there's a little bit of insecurity in me that I just don't feel like I'm uh enough from a credibility standpoint or whatever. And I think if I just continue to learn, then I'm gonna get smarter and I'm gonna have more credibility and all this kind of stuff. So then I'll overconsume on the self-development books or the business books or the marketing books or all these kinds of things that I do, thinking this is going to be the thing that unlocks something in my brain that makes me more productive. When really, if I would just stop that and take action, I'm going to be more productive. And so like the overconsumption is a thing in your brain is looking for this dopamine hit, and it all comes back to just like probably a chemical makeup in your brain that you're looking for this thing. And with social media, it's a thing too, where you're scrolling, checking for that next hit. And so you overconsume on what the social media is because you're just looking
That's
for.
what I did miss most of all when I didn't have
Yeah,
the phone on me.
sure.
I
Sure.
wasn't doing that reflex thing.
Yeah.
Didn't want
Yeah.
to.
Dude, yeah, we've talked about it before where I'll be sitting at my desk and I will literally pick up the phone and just scroll for no reason. And I don't even know why I'm picking up the phone. It's just this mental thing that's in your brain. It's like you're addicted to it, but it turns into overconsumption. And then it leads to such negative outcomes because when you overconsume content, you're not producing content or producing in other areas of your life. Maybe you're not a content producer. Okay. So fine. You need to produce at work. You need to produce for your family. You need to produce in different areas of your life. So when you spend all of your time consuming content on social media or watching Netflix, if you sit and binge 4 hours of Netflix, like you're consuming a ton of stuff, but what productivity are you getting in the world? Like, and there's a fine line, and people poke holes and whatever and say, "Oh, well, that's my relaxed time." Okay, fine, fine, once in a while. But if you veg out on Netflix 4 hours a day, come on now, like we got
Yeah.
to have some kind of happy medium here. And it's just this mindset of the world that we live in. It's so easy to get things. It's so easy to get food. It's so easy to get content. It's so easy to get literally anything you want, that we as a society overconsume. And then it just becomes habit. And so now it's like, oh, I'll just keep scrolling and keep doing this or keep eating this because it feels good. And then we eat way more than we need to, way more than we should, because it's just mindless consumption of whatever it is we're consuming in that moment. And if we would take half a second and think about what it is that we're doing here and how much of it we're consuming, maybe we'd make a better choice and actually take some action on some stuff to make our life a little better, instead of scrolling away, consuming a bunch of crap that we don't need.